report every time it comes out, see what's different from year to year.
Definitely.
It's a yearly report, right?
Yes, it is yearly, and it is really interesting to see different trends, and I think it'll be really interesting even to look potentially generational, like you mentioned.
Yeah. All right, great. Well, thanks, Rachel. I appreciate your time.
All righty. Thanks, Charlene. Great stuff there. Well, after Charlene, it's time to head over to the Analyst Corner with Mitch, who has some great content for you today. Mitchell, take it away.
On prior segments of the Analyst Corner, I mentioned that we'd be looking more specifically at the investments that we've made in DevOps and Agile and the cloud and software architectures and the ability to deliver software and the impact that that's having on our business. That's one of the reasons why Accelerated Strategies Group has undertaken some research in the area of software delivery management. Now, why do we care so much about that? That's at the intersection of digital transformation and software teams and organizations' ability to deliver on what those strategies are. That's really the key thing here. With digital transformation, I know there's sort of one definition of that's making our systems and our interactions with our employees, customers, et cetera, in a digital form. Yeah, that's a valid definition, but frankly, I think the real power behind digital transformation is being able to have the software delivery capability that enables the business to take on bigger, greater, even more disruptive strategies and respond to disruption in the marketplace, both in an offensive and defensive capacity. So that's really the value. I mean, part of that really means that the software teams, the software organization, whether outside or inside of IT, that the business can rely on them. Not only rely, but they trust. They know that your ability to deliver software is not only predictable, but it's fast and it's agile and resilient. So the business can take on greater risks. The business can handle competition more quickly or threats that happen in the market. And that's why we're looking at software delivery management. And we're doing this in conjunction with CloudBees, who is a product company in this space. They're sponsoring the research. We're happy to be working with them. And I'd love it if you would take this survey. Matter of fact, I'm asking you to take this survey. It will only take you about 7 minutes to finish. I'll tell you a little bit about what the survey is looking for because there's some super interesting questions and I anticipate some interesting results, hopefully super interesting, that we will get from it and that we'll share with you, of course. So around this question of the ability to deliver software, by the way, take the survey. It's at acceleratedsurvey.com. Make sure I mention that to take it. It's really easy to take. So around the kind of things we're looking at is, organizations are trying to manage multiple interdependent software supply chains. It's one thing when you have one software team, one group that you're working with primarily, and it's much different if you're working across 3, 4 multiples of software delivery supply chains and synchronizing that and making sure you're getting what is going to have the most impact to the business. Matter of fact, that's one of the key things we're also looking at is, are you getting the results, the impact, not just you're delivering software or you're doing so many continuous deploys per hour, per day, whatever. Those are interesting metrics, but they're not a true indication of, are you making a business impact? And how do you measure that? What kind of metrics go into it? So here's an example of some of the questions that we're asking. One of them is a couple of them are just around that question. What's your ability or how can you tie business impact from the delivery or even the delay of software, whether it be new features, new capabilities, products, corrections, whatever it might be. And then also, how do you prioritize your software delivery? There are so many requests, and sometimes you can get kind of lost in the volume or the noise of all the things that needs to be done. And what sounds urgent isn't necessarily the most valuable thing to do. Sometimes it is, but it's really easy to get caught up into trying to make everybody happy or fixing the squeakiest wheel, whatever it might be. The simple ways of describing it, that these things are generally much more complex than that. But are you able to successfully prioritize? how or what you're going to deliver in your software so that it does have a measurable impact to the business. Also looking at the capabilities that you're delivering through software. Does it get used? Do you have to promote it, or how do people find out about those capabilities? I don't know about you, but oftentimes I'll find out, oh, I didn't know that piece of software had that feature, or that online service did that. And there's this idea within user interface, user experience design called discovery, or the cost of discovery. Are you requiring end users to discover this capability, or is it something that is kind of be intuitively obvious, or it's been incorporated in the design in such a way that it's going to present itself when it's time, rather than you having to say, oh, I didn't know I could do that. So how do you do that? How effective are you? And also looking at DevOps and Agile and things like that, how has that helped you break down the silos? Of course, with DevOps, we obviously need this collaborative team working together, not only across the technical organizations, but with the business, with product, with finance, et cetera, and auditing, compliance, a number of groups, security. So how well has that helped you break down the silos, and where are you in that journey? We're also looking at the data that you have accessible from your DevOps tool chains, and how does that inform you of things like the progress you're making, delivery timeframes, productivity, things like that, and what metrics do you use to measure those things, as well as your delivery of software. So I've told you quite a bit about this study, and in the time I've described it, it'll probably take about that long to take it. Again, it's about 7 minutes. So please go to acceleratedsurvey.com and complete the survey. We'll be wrapping that up sometime in the probably June timeframe. Report will come out. We'll see what we're looking at in terms of responses and how much analysis is required. So go to acceleratedsurvey.com to participate. There's also a number of other things that we have available to you. If you go to the Accelerated Strategy site, we offer a 30-minute free inquiry with one of our analysts. Now you might say, well, is that just a sales pitch? It's one of the things that's extremely useful for us, is a way of connecting with people that we haven't been talking to, new people that, yes, you may become a customer, you may not. That's not really the intention. It's really to help us, inform us of what the questions are in the market, and also help you with something you may be wrestling with. And we'll talk about whatever you want, maybe about DevOps or tool chains or cloud architectures, et cetera. It could be lots of things. Could be digital transformation or how to scale your DevOps. All kinds of great conversations happen. And of course, those are conversations with analysts. And again, it's free. We don't charge for it. Sometimes it leads to a longer relationship with you. Sometimes that's just the conversation that we have, and we connect on LinkedIn, and that's it. Either way, it's a success, and we certainly find it extremely valuable, and the feedback is that others do as well. There's also a number of great resources on the Accelerated Strategy site, which is accelst.com, that you have available to you. Many of our analysts are authors. Some of those are free downloads. Some have partial downloads that are free. You can also buy books. But they're writing on things like the impact of automation and AI, DevOps and engineering, and DevOps and how to do digital transformation. There's a succession of books that a number of our analysts have written over time. So you kind of see the evolution of this DevOps journey and some of the cloud and other technologies involved. But we have a lot of free videos. We're obviously part of TechStrong TV and providing content on a nearly or almost everyday basis that TechStrong TV is on. And of course, interviews that we do with companies, we do at conferences, we do as part of the programming on TechStrong, we have podcasts, we have white papers, we have reports, we have all kinds of things. And this all goes to the underlying important principle of Accelerated Strategies Group, which is knowledge wants to be free. Now, it sounds like a tagline, and it is, but we do believe that. We don't charge for our content. You don't have to go to a paywall and download the report for $500 or $2,000. It's there, it's available. People have already paid us to do that research. And so we're happy to provide it to you. So please check it out. That content is free, a number of resources to you. And I wish you the best as you take our survey and participate in our software delivery management research. Thank you.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Thanks, Mitch. Good job as always. Well, it's Thursday, and that means it's time for the Vizard of channels with his channel Roundup, Mike Vizard. Mike, what do you got for us today?
Hey, thanks, Alan. All right, guys, I know we've been talking a lot about COVID-19 and the economy, but it's starting to feel a little like we're getting back to business. This week, of course, was the big IBM Think Digital online conference. So there was a keynote, the first one from Arvind Krishna. I'm not sure it counts as his first one because, well, it was all in a digital format, which is kind of like sending a bunch of video postcards, kind of like this one. But it was interesting nonetheless because he was positing the argument that COVID-19 will become a pivotal turning point in the acceleration of the adoption of digital business. His argument is that organizations are going to figure out that they need to be a lot more flexible and resilient, and there'll be a massive shift in new applications and new systems and everything moving maybe into the cloud or hybrid or edge computing, and all these things will take off because there's going to be this seminal moment where everybody comes back from this event and says, hey, we really need to change the way we operate and think about how we're going to do business going forward. Hopefully for all the channel partners, that's how things will work out. In the meantime, IBM is talking heavily about AI and operations. One of the major announcements of the day is something called Watson AI Ops. It is a collection of algorithms and technologies that IBM has developed around its Watson platform that will now be applied to IT operations of all sorts. And the idea here is that we may not have as many people as we once had available, given the economic conditions, to manage IT. So therefore, we need to invest more in automation and a lot more in AI. These things won't replace humans. We're not at that point where we're going to have bots running everything, but we will get to the point where we can have maybe super administrators who can manage IT at a much higher level of scale than previously, and we'll have this kind of bonding of the man-machine interface to make IT a lot more efficient. At the same time, IBM was talking about an edge computing strategy that will leverage something called Open Horizon. It's an open source project that they helped drive. It's now being developed under the auspices of the Linux Foundation, or the LF Edge people. The idea here is that through a single interface, one administrator can leverage, of course, AI, to manage 10,000 endpoints at the edge. That's a huge number. And of course, if that's the way things go, then the way we think about delivering IT services is about to fundamentally change. Speaking of some fundamental changes, IBM is also talking about something called cloud satellites, available in preview. The idea is that you can take an instance of Kubernetes and drop it on an on-premise environment and then manage it as an extension of IBM Cloud. This all works because of Red Hat OpenShift and the OpenStack instance provided by Red Hat becomes the foundation for this thing. And the idea here again is that we're going to be able to treat the on-premise environment as a natural extension of the cloud, which is interesting because Jim Whitehurst got up and said, hey, this whole move to the hybrid cloud is going to be accelerated, not just because people need more flexibility, but to drive costs out of the equation as well. The days when people could afford to run multiple clouds are coming to a close. And his point is, hey, we're going to drive the convergence of that around the Red Hat OpenShift platform. Of course, IBM and Red Hat are not the only people thinking about that platform convergence. We're seeing Google and Microsoft and a few others talk about it as well, but I think the race is on, and hybrid cloud is about to move past a nice theory to some more of a practical imperative for a lot of organizations, and I think channel partners might want to think about where they sit in that equation. Of course, there are other interesting things going on in the world from a tech perspective this week. Dell rolled out PowerStore, or at least an update to it, but what was interesting about it is that not only did they rewrite the entire operating system for PowerStore, but they added a virtual machine, so now you can run applications right on the storage. The idea is that you might want to run an analytics application right next to where the data that's being analyzed resides to drive out latency. That's a huge idea, but it also kind of says, hey, maybe the storage systems and the server systems are about to converge. It's not just about an HCI kind of convergence, but more about it's just making them one and the same. It turns out that NVMe interfaces are kind of key to this. They have all the bandwidth that you need to kind of drive that level of convergence, and we might not be able to distinguish what's a server and what's a storage system in the future, and that has some interesting implications for how channel partners are organizing their own practices. Meanwhile, arch rival HPE updated the GreenLake Central portal, and this is the mechanism that they use to monitor what people are consuming for the GreenLake platform, and also making it the place where you download third-party applications and tools. And they expanded that range of tools outside of HPE to include partners such as Cohesity. It'll be interesting to see as we go forward how much IT organizations are going to rely on vendors to drive automation versus, say, partners or themselves. It looks like, to me, a lot of organizations are saying, hey, we expect now that the vendor is going to provide some level of managed services and the partners will resell that. Of course, there's MSPs out there that are providing that same level of capability themselves that they built from the ground up. It will be some tension in the business as to determine whether or not who's going to be the provider of the managed services and who's going to get the highest margin as a result, but we'll see. HPE is saying they already have 800 customers for GreenLake, so clearly some traction is heading that way. Other new tech to think about is from New Relic. They launched what they're calling the democratization of dynamic tracing. Basically, they collect the data in the cloud and do the analytics over there, and then they present that to you through a graphical user interface that you can then examine or analyze the root cause of any given issue. This is much better than traditional sampling used in IT monitoring because you get to the root cause of the problem versus what might otherwise be considered a suggestion. Dynamic tracing is coming. It's going to be a huge deal, but the question is, where do you store all the data that you need to analyze and that's gathered by all those agents? And it turns out that that's no small task. So if we can put all that up on the cloud and keep it there, and we only need it for, I don't know, maybe a week or so, then we can get rid of it. It becomes a lot more practical. So maybe dynamic tracing will be more of a service. Finally, the Linux Foundation launched Trust over IP. This is an initiative to define what digital trust is going to be like and make it more efficient, both from a legal perspective and a technical perspective. The technical argument is that, do I really need somebody who's a third party to authenticate my identity to you when we're trying to do a transaction or business, or can we get to the point where the technology will evolve where we can just conduct a transaction because we know who we are? It's called digital trust. Now we're also trying to figure out how to get governments to recognize that as well. This may obviously take some time, but there's working groups being formed, and it's going to be a much bigger conversation as we go forward in terms of how security is managed. Because today we spend an inordinate amount of time and money trying to establish identities, trying to get everybody figured out who they are and what they can access. And maybe there's a more efficient way just to bake that into the system as a whole. All right, guys, that's all we got for this week. Thanks for spending some time with us, and back to you, Alan.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Good stuff from Mike Fazard as always. You know, Mike has a way of just doling out common sense advice, and it's having a good idea of what's going on out there. Anyway, guys, that's going to wrap up our show for today, Thursday, May 7th. We will be back tomorrow for our end of week wrap up Friday show. We've got some great stuff scheduled for Friday. Hope to see you then. Hope you've enjoyed today's show. Let us know if you have any suggestions. And until then, this is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. Be safe, be well, be strong. TechStrong.